Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Remember, subscribe is the vibe. Your boys on the road to 20K humbly. Like button is like the subscribe button is earned. We got the 2014 Spurs and the best basketball ever played. Now, if we're talking about the 100 and plus years that the NBA's been around, I think we're up to 100. I've seen a lot of dynasties come and go. I can't even narrow the Spurs down to just 2014. I think the Spurs had like a decade of dominance. They were just a thorn in everybody's backside. Greg Popovich could not miss. He had the players. He had the system. They had the chips. They were constantly getting in the way of everyone. You hated to be locked in a bracket in a best-of-7 series with the San Antonio Spurs, with Tim Duncan, with Manu, with Tony, with even Bruce Bowen. And then later on, they added Kawhi. It was just... when is this window gonna close? The Spurs were literally ball blocking anybody from winning championships. I'm talking about a well-oiled machine followed by a GOAT coaching. They were like the New England Patriots of basketball, bro. So the mere fact that we're narrowing it down to simply 1 year is doing the Spurs an injustice, because these boys was toxic for a decade. But we're gonna get right into it, because you know your boy Gabos loves traveling back through time. So we're gonna get right into the 2014 Spurs and the best basketball ever played. Ever played? Apparently.
13. NBA Finals, Game 6. The San Antonio Spurs lead the Miami Heat 3-2.
The Ray Allen jump
it is
shot.
the end of the game, and the Spurs hold a 3-point lead. If the clock hits 0 and the Heat haven't converted a 3-point shot, San Antonio will win the championship.
Beautiful series. Classic.
What happens next will be remembered forever.
Ever. To this day, I ain't gonna front. One of the greatest shots I've ever witnessed in my life. Matter of fact, even when this shot went down when I was watching it live, I accidentally unplugged my cable cord and didn't actually see the shot going because I was jumping with excitement and I landed on the plug and anyways. To this day, I'm still trying to figure out, why did Greg Popovich take Tim Duncan out this possession? And this transpired. I'm talking about, he's gonna get right into it, but all the right things needed to happen for Miami to steal this championship. I don't know. This series just made me fall in love with basketball even more, man.
Unprecedented. Ray Allen's 3 forced overtime, which the Miami Heat won, which forced a winner-take-all Game 7, which the Miami Heat won. It's one of the great collapses, one of the most devastating heartbreaks ever. It's one of those things that just never happens. And it's even more curious because of all the teams it could have happened to. The last one you would ever expect would be the Spurs.
For real.
We're talking about the model organization of basketball. Since drafting Tim Duncan in 1997, the Spurs hadn't missed the playoffs once, hadn't won at less than a 50-win rate, and had claimed 4 championships. They defined culture. Whether or not your team could play like the Spurs, you wanted your team and your organization to behave like the Spurs. No ego, extreme accountability, and a level of buy-in and belief that was self-fulfilling. As head coach Greg Popovich liked to say, not everyone could play for the Spurs. They wanted guys who had gotten over themselves. Guys who either had nothing to prove or who had everything to prove. That buy-in and accountability, made possible by Tim Duncan's sublime example and enforced by Pop's brutal honesty and competitive fire, made the Spurs perhaps the most disciplined, consistent institution in all of sports. Yet, they were the ones who came as close to winning a championship as anyone has ever come without actually winning. How do you come back from that? If you're the Spurs, how do you come back from that? You still had a chance to win in overtime of Game 6. You still had a chance to win in Game 7. Even more, this could have been the last run for the Spurs. Their big 3 of Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker were going to turn 37, 36, and 31 years old respectively during the following season, well past their physical primes, in a league with young stars like LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, and the like. Despite their success, the Spurs had never made back-to-back finals appearances. With those kind of obstacles staring at you in the face,
but they did.
How do you find it in yourself to sit through an entire offseason, gruel through an 82-game regular season, and fight through a whole postseason just to get another chance at the ring you almost had? Then again, if there was ever a team that could look at those obstacles and think to themselves, yeah, we can get it done, it would be the Spurs. That journey started in the offseason, where Popovich convened the Spurs in Colorado Springs at the Air Force Academy, his alma mater. Nearly every major contributor from the year prior had returned to the team and now possessed a powerful unifying force: shared trauma. Pop harnessed that potential from day one. The first day of training camp at the Air Force Academy, the Spurs did little beside dissect in painful detail every possession of Game 6. For hours, they relived their nightmare
Miss
and
Manu
saw
the
all
free
the mistakes
throw.
they'd each made. No
Yo, Manu missed the free throw. Kawhi Leonard, I think Kawhi Leonard split the free throw. They did everything. Oh my God, it's just a perfect metric. It like things that probably won't even happen twice in life needed to happen for the Miami Heat to take that championship. It's crazy, man.
No one was blameless. Ginobili and Kawhi Leonard had missed free throws that would have iced the game. Every Spur on the floor failed to secure LeBron's missed three. Popovich opted not to have Duncan on the floor at that moment so he could have better perimeter defense. And they all failed to recollect themselves and rally for Game 7. The point in all this, of course, was that it was not a single failure or an individual who would cost them. There were moments all throughout Game 6 and all throughout Game 7, mistakes by everyone that could have changed things.
Miss Bunny.
They had lost,
Oh my God.
but they understood that they lost as a team. And if that was true,
And Duncan
if
missed
they
the
were
tip
to
back.
win, they would have to win as a team. It was a testament to the kind of character that Popovich was convinced these players had, that they could confront this nightmare and reckon with it, rather than avoid it, downplay it, or run from it. To find that the best way out is through. Stare at the sun and let that feeling of failure motivate them to win for themselves and for each other. And that's all great, but seriously, how many times has a team lost a championship and said that kind of stuff? Every team that loses on the highest stage thinks that they're just one step away. But more often than not, the reality of making that arduous climb again is just too much. Did these Spurs really have what it would take? But first, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Keeps. Hair loss. It's something that most guys spend their lives in fear of. You look
Hold
at
it
your
down.
have what it takes. In maybe the most loaded Western Conference ever, the grit and grind Grizzlies, the Lob City Clippers, the Dwight and Harden Rockets, the Westbrook and Durant Thunder,
Never took the Rockets
plus
seriously.
emerging teams like the Warriors and the Trailblazers. In that Western Conference, the Spurs finished with a 62-20 record, the best in basketball and the franchise's best since 2006. They led the league in assists
I'm
per
like, bro, how? I'm talking about young Russ, young KD together. You got young Steph, young Clay together. You got James Harden with Howard. That was kind of mid. But you also had the Clippers with Chris Paul, Blake, and DeAndre Jordan all in their primes. I'm like, how was the Spurs walking through all these guys? And who did the Spurs have? Just, your prototypically average to above average role bench. I mean, you had Tim, you had Tony, but the Spurs weren't the most exciting team to watch. Like, I'm just going to keep it a bean. They weren't exactly box office, They just did everything right every night. You know what I mean? Like,
game,
oh my God.
3-point field goal percentage, and plus minus. Pop was named Coach of the Year. Tony Parker was a second-team All-NBA selection.
Second
And
team.
Kawhi a second-team All-Defensive selection.
Second team.
And that's kinda it. This team did not thrive on star power. Sure, they had the best power forward ever, but he's not a traditional star. And sure, they had the winningest trio in basketball history. Yeah, Kawhi was slowly developing into one of the most devastating two-way forces in the league. But they didn't rely on any one
Bruh.
player. In fact, not one of their players, not Tony Parker, not Kawhi, not even Tim Duncan, averaged over 30 minutes a game. This team thrived on its depth and on the strength of that
Daddy.
roster as a single, cohesive unit. You didn't have to worry about stopping one or two guys. You had to worry about stopping 8 or 9 guys. The results speak for
You said
themselves.
8 or 9 guys. Yeah, for real.
And beyond just the attitude and culture of the Spurs. It was their ability and willingness to give chances to and find success in guys that had been discounted that made them the envy of front offices everywhere. The
Just a
Spurs
system.
were one of the first teams to really start scouting international players, exploiting a market inefficiency because of a stigma surrounding those players' toughness. The fact that some of the best players in the league today are foreign players is an afterthought. I certainly pay little mind to the fact that guys like Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and Giannis Antetokounmpo were born outside of the US. We know that great players can come from anywhere.
Fact.
The Spurs deserve credit for reminding us of that. That roster consisted of an NBA record 10 international players.
Oh, I didn't know
Duncan
that.
was born in the Virgin Islands and was a no-brainer with the first pick in '97. But Parker was the 28th pick in the
Frenchman.
draft out of France and went on to become a Finals MVP. Ginobili was a late second-rounder out of Argentina who would go on to become an Olympic gold medalist and one of the greatest six men in basketball history.
Manu.
Guys like Marco Bellinelli, Aaron Baines, Patty Mills, Thiago Splitter, and Boris Diaw were guys who came from all across the globe. Italy, Australia, France, and found
So the Spurs had everyone but Americans. I didn't even notice that back in the day.
places as vital contributors on the best team in basketball. They were guys who had nothing to prove, or who had everything to prove. And to watch those guys play together, to see the way they interacted, how much they enjoyed each other's company, both on and off the court, it really does give credence to the culture that Pop preached. That the Spurs were and are a family. It's something that was carefully cultivated. No egos, no squeaky wheels. After the games, almost all of them, the Spurs go out to dinner. And if you ever played for the Spurs, for a career or a season, and Pop knows you're in town, you're getting invited to dinner. We roll our eyes when people talk about playing the game the right way, because we know that most of the time, when the chips are down and push comes to shove, those words are just words. It's easy to do when it's easy. It's hard to do when it's hard. That's what makes the Spurs special. They did play the right way. They did excel as a team. They did sacrifice. Manu took a 50% pay cut to help make salaries work. In fact, the salaries for the entire Big
I wish I might. 50?
Three. Duncan, Parker, and Manu combined for only $2 million more than Kobe Bryant made by himself. In a sport where shots mean points and points mean paychecks, the Spurs, over and over again, gave up good shots for better shots. Without imposing athletes or stunning singular talent, the Spurs adopted a more European style of play, perfect
So
for their
toxic,
international
yo.
roster. Cutting, passing, and shooting became paramount. Spacing, screens,
Ginobili.
kickouts, and
Ginobili,
cuts
that
kept
pass
the
was
offense
cold.
in constant motion and was made possible only because the Spurs were utterly selfless with the basketball and ruthlessly intelligent in their decisions.
Yo.
They got the best
This is
shots
what the
in the
league had to
sport
deal with.
all year long because they bought into a higher ideal. And they bought in because they were all committed to a single goal. They were peaking at the right time, too. They finished the season having won 22 of their last 26 games, including a franchise record 19-game winning streak. So what the hell happened in the first round? It's the fly in the ointment for this Spurs team as a first-tier all-time great team.
Dirk.
Taken to 7 in the first round by the 8-seed Dallas Mavericks. Now, was the West loaded? Absolutely. Were the Mavs better than your average 8-seed?
Yep.
Sure. Was there some cross-state rivalry, and did Vince Carter steal a game to extend the series? Most definitely.
Crazy shot by
But
Vince.
still, you can't be the greatest team ever if you nearly lost in the first round of the playoffs. Maybe they were looking ahead, so fixated on their pursuit of revenge that they allowed themselves to be removed from the moment and taken to the brink. Whatever the reason, they did ultimately overcome it and beat the Mavs to advance to the second round, where they throttled the Portland Trailblazers in 5 games. In the Western Conference Finals, they were tested by the Oklahoma City Thunder, a proud group in their own right who believed they were the team of the future. The
Son.
hungrier Spurs outlasted OKC in 6 games, sending themselves to back-to-back finals for the first time in franchise
I was
history.
shocked they got past Russ and KD.
And there
I'm
they
not gonna
were.
lie.
The NBA Finals. Again. The Spurs had pushed themselves to grow and to improve for an entire year. Over 8,000 hours. Over 500,000 minutes with this phantom haunting their dreams. And now they were here. against the very team that had beaten them, no less. A rematch. Spurs Heat Round 2. This far-off goal, this illusory motivator, was here in the flesh, and now they could do something about it. The Spurs took Game 1, famously remembered as a game when the arena's air conditioning system failed, and temperatures reached the 90s in the summer Texas heat. The Heat narrowly won Game 2, evening the series and stealing home court advantage. And then, in Game 3, the floodgates opened.
Blowout.
Boris Diaw was inserted into the starting lineup and seemed to unlock something in the San Antonio offense.
OD, bro.
He was a maestro, and he raised their level of play. The passes, the movement, and the shots that the Spurs had been getting all year long, the best in basketball, somehow became even better. They operated in perfect concert with each other, reacting to passes almost before they'd happened, anticipating movement before it had even begun. They buried the Heat offensively and smothered them on defense. Kawhi, who had done an incredible job guarding LeBron the year prior, was just as effective, earning him nicknames like Kryptonite and Kingslayer. He was named the Finals MVP after San Antonio prevailed in 5
That's what
games.
I ain't gonna front. That's what launched Kawhi into that superstar atmosphere, because he's like kind of like Tim Duncan in a sense, just a quiet star. You almost didn't even know how he sounded like, but he came out of nowhere because I think the Spurs traded him from Indianapolis, I believe. I forgot for who. And he just came in there and he was like an instant cog in their system. Young, played both sides of the ball, and he was just a problem, bro. Like when he won Finals MVP, I was like, whoa. I thought I was going to Tim Duncan, but it went to Kawhi. Okay, I guess he's in that discussion now.
It was startling to watch the Spurs.
Crazy.
Striking. It was incredible. Poetic. It's remembered as the beautiful game. When they were clicking, it was the best basketball anyone's ever seen. You almost literally can't play better. The stats back it up. In the fourth quarter of Game 1, the Spurs shot 87%, a finals record. In Game 3, they shot 75% in the first half, a finals record. They led 71-50 going into halftime of that game, the first 70-point half in the finals since the '87 Lakers. They shot 52% from the field in the series, a finals record. Kawhi shot 61% from the field, a record for a finals MVP. They averaged 120.8 points per 100 possessions in the series, the most since data began in 1985. In over 293 games, the Heat had not once lost 3 games in a row with LeBron James in their lineup. The Spurs won games 3, 4, and 5 by an average of 19 points.
Hurt my soul.
In those 3 games, they made 157 more passes than the Heat per game. Those games also just so happened to add up to the best offensive rating over 3 games since that data became available over 30 years ago. They won the finals with a point differential of 70.
I ain't gonna front. I've never seen a team lose the NBA Finals, come back, get their rematch, and absolutely put a whooping. It was embarrassing, bro. Like that ass whooping was so bad, LeBron went back to Cleveland, dog. He said, enough of this. Enough of this. I've seen too much. Enough. Over 140-something more passes per game. Averaging 19-point losses is the first time I've lost 3 straight since I came to Miami. Yo, the Spurs were on a mission. I'm not even gonna hold you, man. That was mission accomplished at its finest, man. It was a mismatch. I've never seen the defending champs look like they were mismatched against dudes competing against them, bro.
Over 5 games, they outscored the Heat by 70 points. And they lost one of those games. It remains the highest point differential in NBA Finals history.
I need that record to be broken,
The
bro.
stats back it up. But honestly, whatever. Those are afterthoughts. We didn't need to look at the stats to know what we were watching. It was perfect. Like someone had turned the sliders up on a video game. Like the Spurs had turned the difficulty down for themselves.
I ain't gonna front. They could have missed.
But my God, they were playing against the Heat, the Heatles, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. It was like watching all this energy, all this angst and anger and heartache radiate out of them and materialize into perfect basketball. People talk about this Spurs team as deserving to be in the best team ever conversation purely because of how dominant they were in the finals. Because we all saw that when the Spurs were at their best, they were capable of transcendence. They found success in the same vein as Isaiah's Pistons and Bill Russell's Celtics, tapping into the core concept of basketball, the platonic idea of basketball. The fact that the Spurs were echoing the sentiments of teams from as far back as the 60s means they weren't breaking any new ground by emphasizing team play.
Yo, look
but
at
as the
shirts.
NBA continues to become
Tim
a more
Duncan had no
star-driven
drip,
league,
man.
their style was anything but. They're my favorite team ever. I love Tim Duncan. I love that he exists as proof that success doesn't have to be this Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, in-your-face screaming asshole. It can also be him or Bill Russell, who led.
Damn, why MJ gotta catch a slug? Damn.
By example, with encouragement and sympathy and humility. I love the relationship that he and Pop have. It's unlike anything else in sports.
Go and go.
They've been described as everything from an old married couple to soulmates. They love each other. Tim's referred to Pop as a father figure to him. I love the fact that the Spurs were made up of international guys who teams had either overlooked or given up on. That the locker room was a collage of national flags. I love that this team really seemed to be friends. That they enjoyed each other's company. That they sacrificed and wanted to see each other succeed. And I loved watching their wounds heal in real time, shot after shot. I've talked before about Bill Russell. And when I did, I talked about the platonic idea of basketball. The idea of the sport that transcends just the shooting and the scoring and gets to the spirit of the thing itself. It's impossible to pin down or define what exactly that idea is, but its effects and results are impossible to miss. We see it here in the 2014 Spurs. We see the same things we saw in those Celtics teams of old. Things like compassion, selflessness, solidarity, resiliency, and triumph. It was important for their catharsis that the Spurs played the Heat. They had brought out the best in each other, and the Spurs were able to get the last laugh and avenge their loss. But by the end of the series, the Spurs hadn't just got revenge over the Heat. They'd achieved redemption for themselves. And they did it in a special, aesthetic, beautiful way. I love this team because in the wake of the most devastating loss in basketball history, the San Antonio Spurs responded together. And together, they played the best basketball that's ever been played.
That's a good one. I ain't gonna front, bro. If I jumped on the court for a pickup game and I seen Tim Duncan, Manu, and Tony Parker on the court together, man, I'm off this. I'm off this, bro. Like, again, with a league with all these profound superstars, you know what I mean? These guys averaging 30. These guys first team this, first team that. The Spurs didn't give a damn about none of that shit, bro. I'll keep it a bean. They didn't give a damn about none of that shit. Back-to-back finals, and not mention, they got their rematch, and they blew the doors off the Heat, bro. Oh, my goodness, man. Like, I'm always going to pay homage to the Spurs because I hated watching them. I hated anytime my team had to face them. But you just have to respect the art of basketball that they did better than anybody, bro. Like, there's no debating. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in. This was the 2014 Spurs, the best basketball ever played. And it'd be hard-pressed to really debate this, man. Like, these guys were him. 60 wins and 20 losses? I beg your pardon? And they don't have a Michael Jordan? But anyways, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. This was your boy Gabos, going right back in time and showing love to the 2014. I mean, not even the 2014. The decade Spurs, man. Because it was a decade of this mess. You know what I mean? Tim Duncan got 5. He could have went 6 for 6. Thank God LeBron took 1, but he won 5, man. I'm going to holler at you guys in the next video. I'm out.